to this episode of the Voicefluencer Show, featuring Marc Ladin. He was actually on the Voice Stand recently as one of the Voicefluencers, and we had a wonderful time chatting about a number of different topics. And it's my pleasure to be able to bring him onto the Voicefluencer Show so we can learn a little bit more, go a little bit deeper with some of the interesting work that he's doing, and also learn a little bit about maybe the patterns and things that he's seeing in the industry. So let's get right to this. Let's welcome Marc onto the show. Hey, Marc, how is it going?
Hey, Teri. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, my pleasure. We had a lot of fun the other day on the Voice Stand. I'm getting my shows confused. The Voicefluencer Show, the Voice Stand, whatever it is. We had a lot of fun, and it's great to have you back. So I appreciate that. For those that don't know you, maybe we can start off with a quick introduction.
Sure. So my name is Marc Ladin. So I'm a general partner at one and soon to be two funds. I started a fund in early 2019 called Voice Punch, whose whole mission is to support and help entrepreneurs with capital and other support resources in the voice AI and audio space. We've got a portfolio we built up in the first fund, and now I'm excited we're partnering with Bradley Metrock, who a lot of you might know from his whole Project Voice shows, events, and other things that he does. We're actually starting the next fund on the journey called Project Voice Capital Partners, which will have a very similar, almost identical mandate of investing in early stage, exciting companies. They're really blazing new trails in this whole exciting space.
Amazing. So how did you specifically land on voice technology? What is it about voice that kind of got you interested?
Sure. So I come from a DNA of a father who is a serial entrepreneur, particularly in technology. And he, about 2015, started bugging me about connected home. And maybe it's 2016. Connected home technologies and what was going on there. And connected home had been this stodgy thing for years and years with like things like, I don't know if people in the audience know, like X10, which are these controllers that sometimes work to turn on lights and do this and do that. And it was all convoluted. But the whole connected home and smart home industry, their sales started to take off around then. And my father was like, you need to check this out. It's really exciting. And I dug into it, and it occurred to me it was definitely taking off. And one of the driving factors was suddenly there's this new thing called the Amazon Alexa, which allowed people to control some of their smart home devices with their voice. And for me, the rabbit hole I went down
Here's
was,
something
wow.
I found on the web.
Whoops.
Case in point.
Case in point. About. The rabbit hole that I went down because of that exercise was that, hey, if you can control your lights with your voice, what other technology could you control? And so the answer that I came to fairly quickly was, hey, in the future, we're going to be able to interface with all forms of technology using our voice. And from that thesis, a partner and I started Voice Punch in early 2019, said we're going to invest in that intersection of this new interface with technology and its amazing growth because we saw such huge potential. And we're super excited about what we've seen so far. We built up an exciting portfolio of companies, and we're just driving forward.
Amazing. Well, that's a great segue because now I want to hear about like what are the areas that you have invested in, what are the areas that you're excited about, what are the areas that you get involved in, like all of that stuff. Let us know like what are you looking at in the voice world, which is quite big, obviously.
Yeah, there's so many interesting areas within voice, and without getting specifics on companies, we're looking at a bunch of different intersection points. We're looking at the intersection of NLU and verticalization of NLUs because getting our knowledge and understanding really trained for these new voice models in a specific vertical seems to work really well and allows for delightful experiences. I keep hearing startups saying we're the gong for this or the chorus for that, for healthcare, for long-term care, for HR, for insurance. And what's happened is people are realizing that you can get to delightful experiences with today's technology stack by having very verticalized and tailored models that focus on specific use cases where the recognition and the vocabulary and language is fairly consistent, and you can have really great experiences. So we're looking at different forms of verticalization within the natural language models and such. We're looking at augmentation of our experiences with voice, whether it's by enhancing them, by creating more rich experiences. So whether it's playing games and suddenly be able to add in, game packs for your communication chats, whether it's adding in actually reading in the read off the CPU and suddenly you can add new sounds to the games you're already playing, whether it's, we have a company that we've invested in, we talk about called Colorcast. And what they've done is they've unbundled the video feed from the audio feed, and suddenly you can, have listen to whatever sportscaster you want for the Bills or the Jets or the Patriots game, and not the only one that happens to be playing on your TV. It's a really great use case because people either, don't relate to the sportscaster that's on the TV and they can't do anything about it. Or let's say you're a woman, you want to hear from someone from a female perspective. Or let's say you get a feed and you're in a foreign country, it's only in English and you don't speak English, and you want to see the latest NFL game, but suddenly it's in your local language because there's a local language sportscaster. So that unbundling of the audio feed and the video feed, I think is super interesting and exciting. There's a bunch of other areas that are happening in audio consumption, how we do it, where we do it, why we do it, that we're always looking for good plays and investments there. Infrastructure is core, right? Thinking ways that are, what are the tools that are necessary for people to easily create, consume, improve on, analyze. Our voice actions and activities are super important. They drive a lot of commerce. They drive analytics, they drive advertising. So we're looking at ways we can improve the infrastructure that helps us continue to drive towards this voice economy.
Wow, you covered a lot. That's great. The color casting is really interesting. I have to ask a question about that because I'm very intrigued by that now. Can anybody be the commentator then, or is it limited?
Step right up. You can join right now for nothing. And there's no cost to doing it, so everybody is. My partner actually said he's actually going to do one of his local games in Tennessee. So it's him and his brother are going to team up to do one, but anyone can, and that's what's so exciting. It basically allows anybody to be in their own play-by-play, and everybody likes to play armchair quarterback for a reason. Well, suddenly you can have an audience. That's a really empowering idea, if you ask me.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting. I have a whole bunch of questions that I could selfishly ask about that. I'm curious if that applies to the NHL yet, because I'm a big NHL fan. But anyway, we'll cross that bridge another time. This is great. You touched on like the fact that this allows anybody to sort of be that armchair quarterback. So that's giving control more to the person. Are you looking at? And we talked a little about this. So I know you're at least having some thoughts about this. But as we go from Web 2 to Web 3, where we have this decentralized process. It's not so much that information is controlled by one central place, but it's distributed. Where do you see that going, or what are your thoughts now about Web3 and everything that goes along with that and the intersection with voice?
Yeah, it's a real jumble when it comes to Web3. I think the term was coined, I think it was like 2004, maybe. Maybe it's later than that, but everybody's using it. It's the most current buzzword. It used to be like blockchain and crypto. Now it's Web3, and there's all these different permutations that the people like to make them sounds really smart talking about. But for me, when I think about Web3, I've been trying to think through recently some hypotheses around what does it actually mean for voice and how we interface. And, the model from Web 2 was centralized in the cloud, and now we're going to Web 3 and decentralized. So the thing that I think is one of the interesting challenges, the opportunities, is that one of my companies was a mobile stack company. And one of the best things we did was we turned on push messaging. So suddenly we had this broadcast beacon, and it drove huge engagements. We pushed it out. And it works for advertisers because they want to push messages. And suddenly that enables huge multi-billion-dollar industries from Google and Facebook on down to be successful because they can push messages to the audience. When you get more to a pull model, which is more voice and getting to centralized data sets and things like that, it's really interesting how that changes the models for commerce. And there'll be all these new ones that are going to come about. But I think it creates some interesting challenges specific to voice and opportunities in terms of how do you figure out how to pull the right information, and how does commerce fit into that picture? Because we're fairly, sentient beings when we think a lot of things. Our problem is the paradox of choice is one of the weaknesses when it comes to how we make decisions. And voice speakers just amplify that. One of the biggest problems that happened early in the evolution of smart speakers, in my opinion, was that someone said at, Amazon or Google, hey, what can you do with our voice speaker? And they're like, everything. I'm like, no, that you got to train people on a glide path to say, what should I be doing so that we actually know the right questions to ask and things to be doing. So, sorry about that. Alexa loves me today.
No problem.
So I thought it was, honestly, Terry, as a funny aside, I thought it was like a little like the crook being pulled off stage, like your time's up, like that. So I thought it was me. Anyway,
that's like back on the voice stand with the timer, and that's like yeah,
right,
exactly.
I missed the timer. Same snafu new day. But look, I don't consider myself really even informed on this topic. I think it's really interesting, and there's a lot of smarter people thinking about this in much better ways than I do. And so I'm trying to learn more. So if anybody has any ideas in that area and where these intersections occur, please reach out. I'm always trying to talk to smart people and learn about things that are taking advantage of some of these changes and helping think through, because the best investment opportunities for us are the ones that fit along some type of investment thesis. And I like to, chew on them for a bit, talk to smart people like you, Teri, and others, and say, okay, what could that mean? And so that's how we get to hopefully good answers.
Right. What about the NFT side of things? I know that we were chatting a little bit before. You gave an example of a way that, a certain audio clip could be used, but let's hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, very similar. I think the NFT is creating more channels for monetization of digital content. And so audio content in particular is super interesting. And so you might, as we were using the analogy from one of the Clint Eastwood movies, when he says like, make my day, if you could own that audio clip as an NFT, why couldn't you? Right? Why wouldn't that be a thing you could have as a whole nother way to monetize some of that content? So it opens it up new channels and paths for content creators across the board. And so I think there's going to be new streams of commerce created for audio specifically, and voice is part of that. And I lump them together. Voice is a subset of audio in some ways, but I think it's going to create unique things that will actually be able to create these unique versions that we can create these capsules of content that we can turn into money in some capacity. Or we open up also for creators new streams for them, because one of the things as a creators are always looking for, okay, how do I make a business out of this? And really it's the power of their audience. And then now it's becoming the power of their audience and their content. And then, hey, can I resell some of my content? I mean, I think some of these things are just like, they're blowing up in ways that even we wouldn't have imagined. I mean, I think you may have seen recently where someone raised $40 million through a DAO to go buy the Constitution, right? A copy of it. I mean, fascinating. I think the analogy I heard from someone else much smarter than I am was that, that's interesting. Wait until someone gets around and says, let's look at like one of these big oil companies, and we don't like their policy on the green environment. We're going to set up a DAO and go buy them, fire everybody, and make them into a green company. I mean, like, that's going to happen. Right. Yeah. I think there's some exciting things happening. So anyway, NFTs, audio content, there's lots of new things. We're at the very early stages of figuring that out. There's a lot of different platforms for monetization. They're cropping up. People are just at the early stages of figuring that out. And so we're looking at things that we think will help that, and hopefully will be some good new opportunities for us.
That's great. Yeah. Opportunity is the key word right now, because I think with the amount of change that's happening with the way the whole internet is structured and all this, the buzzword 2 to 3, web 2 to 3, it's very, very interesting with the opportunities and the creativity I think that it's going to lend itself to. This is fantastic. In the last couple minutes here, if people are listening to this and they're hearing you speak and they want to get involved and they want to get your take on their own personal company, maybe it's a two-part question. Number one is, what are you looking for in a company that's coming to approach you with an idea? And maybe two is, how can they actually contact you?
Sure. So what am I looking for? So venture capital at its core is just people that are smart people, looking at lines and following to the end of their logical conclusions. So all we're trying to do is saying, hey, this line is here and we can see it getting to there. And so all we're trying to do is predict lines that go in directions we like, which is hopefully to big markets, big ownership, differentiated stories. And they're all kind of similar to some degree. Our differentiation is that we're thesis driven. So we're a little bit more in tune to the marketplace, sourcing some more interesting companies, hopefully, and people in the space value having us because we have a little better sensibility about the space and where it's going than some of the other more generalist venture capital firms. But we look for, at the end of the day, I tell people it's usually, we look for the racehorse over the race. And we try and be in good races, but we want to make sure there's good racehorses. And where we've gotten, where we've seen things not work out, or where there's racehorses that don't race in the ways we think they could. And so that's a process of us as we mature as an organization, getting better at picking the right things. But the time compression is getting heavier and heavier on making decisions in venture because there's more and more people doing it. So the thing that we have to really figure out is what our North Stars are, and the team's important. A lot of different characteristics we look for in them. Too many to go through on this conversation. We look for people. We look for startups in spaces that are going to mature in a time frame that we can earn a good return on. And that's the single biggest challenge for voice startups specifically that I've seen, is the timing question. Because at the end of the day, our thesis says at some point, all technology has some kind of voice AI type interface. But the distinction is it's going to be different for different industries. And we can't wait 20 years for something to materialize. It has to happen within our fund lifespan of 10 years. So we got to be very diligent and disciplined in making sure we're understanding timelines to value, because I meet so many great startups that have great ideas and that's going to work. But then the answer comes back is that's going to work, but not in a time frame where I can get a good return for my investors' capital. And that's disappointing sometimes for the entrepreneur to hear, because they're beating their eyes and arms bloody trying to make it happen.
Sure.
And it's tough, because it's just, we try to make good decisions. But look, I look out, there's a bunch of different voice startups that are doing fantastic that we passed on. They're doing great. I love it. Just reminds me that, in venture, one of the rules is if you're right 20% of the time, you're really doing great. So that means we're wrong 80% of the time. So I'm like, you know what? Don't take a no investment decision from any venture capitalist as anything other than what it is. It's just an outlier. 80% likelihood they're wrong.
That's a great piece of advice. No, I definitely appreciate that. Fantastic. Well, where can people go to contact you or get in touch with you or whatever? What are some resources that you would suggest for listeners and viewers?
Sure. You can go to our website. There's our contact information is there. You can go to Project Voice Capital Partners. I think it's pvcp.vc. Reach out. I think my email is fairly widely distributed. I'm on LinkedIn. Reach out, ping me, say hello. And we try and we know we can't invest in every company, but we like to try and help if we can. And we'll do whatever we can to be useful where it's possible.
That's great. Well, thanks so much, Marc. Really, really a pleasure having this chat, learning a little bit more about your thought process and the areas that you guys are focused on, and also what your thoughts are going forward here. And there's a lot of questions, and I don't think there's a lot of answers yet, but we'll figure it all out together, I suppose. So really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Teri. Appreciate it as well. It's fun.
All right. Take care.